In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where stars shimmer like diamonds on a velvet blanket, there existed a Grand Council. This was no ordinary gathering. A galactic alliance was a meeting of beings from dozens of worlds, some more advanced than others, but all coming together to form a united front in the pursuit of knowledge and peace across the stars. Among them were species that had mastered the secrets of the universe, bending time and space to their will. And then there were the humans. Humanity had recently joined the alliance, and although the other species were polite, there was always a quiet doubt. The other aliens could not help but wonder how these small, seemingly fragile creatures had earned a place among the stars. After all, they didn't have the telepathic powers of the Zorlixians or the technological marvels of the Centaurians. But what humans did have was determination and a certain resourcefulness. So on the day of the grand meeting, as the Council of Representatives gathered to discuss important matters of the galaxy, the human ambassador, Grigor Thorn, stepped up to address the assembly. "Greetings, honored members of the Galactic Council," Grigor said, his voice calm but strong. "Today, I come to share with you a curious aspect of human culture, something that is central to our way of life. We call them pets." The room was immediately filled with confused whispers. The Zorlixian ambassador, a tall being with shimmering, translucent skin, turned to their fellow Centaurian delegate, whose multi-armed form gestured in confusion. "Pets?" the Zorlixian asked, their voice thick with curiosity. "What is the meaning of pets? Are they not just tools for labor?" Grigor smiled warmly, understanding the confusion. "Not at all. Pets are animals that we share our lives with. They provide companionship, comfort, and even, at times, help with various tasks. But more than that, they're part of the family. We care for them, feed them, and love them in return for nothing but their presence." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. The Centaurian leader, a massive creature with 4 heads, each adorned with bright, colorful feathers, shook their heads slowly. "Why?" the Centaurian asked. "Why would any species, let alone an intelligent one, choose to spend time, energy, and resources caring for creatures that cannot contribute meaningfully to society? If they do not help with work or offer benefits, why would you bother?" Grigor looked out across the alien faces in the room, all waiting for an answer. It wasn't easy to explain the human experience of companionship, especially to beings who didn't experience emotions the same way humans did. But Grigor was determined to give it a try. "It's about connection," Grigor said. "Pets, especially animals like dogs, rabbits, birds, and even cats, provide us with something very important: affection. They offer a kind of emotional support that no machine or logical system can. They love us for who we are, not for what we do or what we can offer." The words seemed to float in the air like strange music. Some of the delegates nodded thoughtfully, while others still looked completely bewildered. The Corman delegate, a species known for their long, beak-like faces, raised an eyebrow. "You mean to say you feed and shelter these animals for the simple reason of love?" the Corman asked, their voice low and slow. "Yes," Grigor replied, feeling a sense of pride in the simplicity of it. "Yes, we do. In fact, many humans form strong bonds with their pets, even to the point where these animals become family members. They help reduce our stress, make us laugh, and sometimes even save our lives. But they also give us a sense of purpose and comfort." At this point, the room was silent. The concept was foreign to them, almost too foreign to accept. The Alliance members were known for their rationality, logic, and efficiency. Grigor sat down beside Whiskers, petting her gently. "It's not about her obeying us or doing what we want. It's about the bond we share. She doesn't need to be perfect. She doesn't need to be trained or obedient. She just needs to be herself. And in return, we love her for that." The aliens were quiet for a long moment. They could see that Grigor truly believed what he was saying, but they still couldn't understand it fully. They were so used to control, efficiency, and logic. Everything had to make sense, had to follow rules. But here they were, surrounded by confusion, chaos, and yet there was something strangely calming about it all. Something warm. Lanu, the Centaurian, was the first to speak again, their many arms folding thoughtfully. I still don't understand why you would tolerate such chaos. But perhaps there is something more to this than I can see. There is something comforting in the way you speak about it. Maybe, just maybe, you're right. Rook, the Corpsman delegate, nodded slowly. I will admit I'm intrigued. There is a strange power in this bond you have. It doesn't make sense, but perhaps that is the point. Zerk, ever the scientist, seemed deep in thought. I still can't explain it, they muttered. But perhaps there is more to this human love for pets than logic can explain. And with that, the aliens were left to reflect on the strange and unpredictable creature that was Whiskers. Though they had started the visit with skepticism and doubt, they couldn't deny that the cat had made an impact on them. A small, unassuming animal had caused chaos, yes, but it had also opened their eyes to something they hadn't considered before, something beyond logic and reason. The first step toward understanding. By the end of the visit, the alien delegation was starting to change their views, albeit reluctantly. Zerk had grown curious about the concept of unconditional love, and Lanu was beginning to see the value in embracing the unknown. Rook, surprisingly, had begun to see the appeal of having a creature that could simply sit and share space with you without needing anything in return. As the delegation boarded their ship to return to the Galactic Council, they found themselves deep in thought. The mysteries of human pets, especially cats, had only just begun to unravel. And though they didn't fully understand the bond between humans and their pets, one thing was certain: they would never look at a cat, or the concept of love, quite the same way again. The next day, after the chaos of Whiskers' first encounter with the alien delegates, things seemed calmer. But the aliens were still processing everything that had happened. They hadn't expected a small cat to cause so much trouble, or to have such a strange effect on them. Yet, here they were, trying to make sense of this bizarre phenomenon. Gregor could see that the aliens were still struggling to understand the purpose of these animals, and he had a feeling that they needed to witness a more normal day with Whiskers. Perhaps if they saw her in a quieter moment, they could begin to understand what made cats so special to humans. So, he invited the delegation over to his home again the following morning. The aliens were a bit hesitant, but their curiosity had gotten the better of them. They were eager to see if they could uncover more about the mysterious behavior of this strange creature. A calm morning with Whiskers. The morning started off quietly. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the room. Gregor had prepared some tea, and the aliens had gathered around the living room. Whiskers, as always, was lounging on the couch, looking as relaxed as could be. At first, everything seemed peaceful. The alien delegates watched as Gregor sat down and gently stroked Whiskers, who purred contentedly. The sound of her purring filled the room like a soft hum, soothing in its simplicity. Gregor smiled as he watched the aliens' faces soften slightly. Perhaps they were beginning to see the charm of this little creature. But just when it seemed like everything was settling down, Whiskers decided it was time to do something. Well, typical of a cat. Without warning, Whiskers jumped up from the couch and sprinted across the room, making a beeline for the bookshelf. Her movements were fast and graceful, almost like a blur. The aliens watched in confusion as she leaped onto the top shelf, knocking over a few books in the process. Not again, Gregor muttered under his breath, though he wasn't truly upset. He was used to this by now. Zerk, the Zorlixian scientist, was once again the first to react. She's climbing, Zerk said in disbelief. Why does she climb? She has no purpose for this behavior. She doesn't need to reach anything. Why is she doing this? Gregor laughed. It's just what she does. Cats love to climb. It's instinctual for them. It's in their nature. Lanu, the Centaurian, seemed especially puzzled. But why climb for no reason? What's the point? Gregor shrugged. For Whiskers, climbing is about the freedom to move. Cats have this need to explore and get to high places. It makes them feel safe, secure, and in control. Even if it's just a shelf, it's her way of feeling powerful. The aliens didn't seem entirely convinced, but they continued to observe. Whiskers remained perched on top of the shelf, her tail flicking from side to side. She surveyed the room as if she were a queen on her throne, watching over her kingdom. And then, as if it had been pre-planned, Whiskers suddenly leaped down with lightning speed, landing perfectly on the couch. She shook herself and began grooming her fur as if nothing had happened. It was as if the whole event had been a simple stretch of the legs. Whiskers' mischief continues. Just when the aliens thought the day would be peaceful, Whiskers decided to remind them that she was still in charge. Gregor, Lanu, Zerk, and Rook had all been sitting around the coffee table, talking about the peculiar behavior of Whiskers. They were starting to understand a little more, though they still didn't fully grasp it. Then, out of nowhere, Whiskers dashed toward the kitchen. The aliens followed her with their eyes, and Gregor sighed, knowing what was coming. "I've seen this before," he muttered. "Here we go." Without warning, Whiskers leaped onto the kitchen counter, knocking over a cup and sending it crashing to the floor. The aliens gasped in surprise. It wasn't that the cat had done something dangerous. It was just so unexpected. She seemed to do these things on a whim, with no reason at all. "Why is she doing this?" Zerk asked, clearly exasperated. "She's not hunting anything. She doesn't need the food. Why the mess?" Gregor laughed, shaking his head. "It's not about the food or anything useful. Cats just do things for the sake of doing them. They love to play, explore, and yes, sometimes make a mess. It's like they can't help it. But this is wasteful." Rook, the corpsman delegate, said, their beak clicking in frustration. "She's destroying things. What is the purpose of this destruction?" Gregor sat back, thinking carefully. "I guess the purpose is just to be. Cats are creatures of instinct. They don't follow rules the way we do. They do things because they feel like it. And sometimes, that's okay. Not everything has to have a purpose or be efficient. Sometimes, life is just about doing things for fun." The aliens looked at each other, still confused. Lanu's many heads turned to each other as they tried to process the idea. "So you accept the chaos?" Lanu asked. Gregor nodded. "Yes, we do. It's part of the charm of having a cat. They don't do things for the sake of being useful. They do things for their own enjoyment. And in return, they bring us joy, even if they're a bit mischievous sometimes." The unexpected connection. After a few more moments of silence, Whiskers settled back down on the couch. She began cleaning her paws, meticulously licking each one in a slow, deliberate motion. She was calm now, her earlier antics forgotten as she went about her daily grooming routine. The aliens watched her in silence. For the first time, they seemed to be understanding something important. Whiskers wasn't just a pet. She was a creature with her own mind, her own will, and her own way of doing things. The more they observed her, the more they realized that her actions were not driven by logic or utility. She simply lived in the moment, doing whatever felt right for her. Landu was the first to speak again, their voice thoughtful. "You humans seem to love this chaos. You accept it, even embrace it. Perhaps that is the key. Maybe we've been too focused on efficiency, too focused on control, but Whiskers doesn't care about any of that. She just exists." Zerk, who had been deep in thought, finally spoke up as well. "Yes, she's free, completely free. I don't know if I understand it completely, but I can see why humans find comfort in that. She doesn't obey anyone. She doesn't have a master or a set of rules to follow. She just is. Maybe that's why humans love her so much. She reminds you of something important." Rook, the corpsman, nodded slowly. "Freedom and joy. That's what she brings." even if it doesn't always make sense. Gregor smiled, pleased that the aliens were finally starting to understand. Exactly. Whiskers and other pets teach us something that can't always be explained with logic. They remind us to enjoy the small moments, to appreciate life for what it is, and to embrace the unpredictability of the world. A new understanding. As the day came to an end, Gregor felt a sense of accomplishment. He had seen the change in the alien delegates. They had come to Earth with skepticism and confusion, but they were leaving with a new perspective. They hadn't fully understood the bond between humans and their pets, but they had taken the first step toward comprehension. As the ship lifted off from Earth, heading back toward the Galactic Council, Zerk, Lanu, and Rook were quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The journey back would take several hours, but they didn't mind. They had learned something important. Maybe there was more to life than just logic and efficiency. Maybe there was a place for chaos, for joy, and for living in the moment. Zerk, who had always been the most skeptical, finally broke the silence. I still don't completely understand, but I think I see why you humans love your pets. They bring something to your lives that we never considered, something beyond reason. Lanu nodded. Perhaps we can learn something from you, Gregor. Something about appreciating what we have, even if it's a little messy. Gregor smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. I think you're starting to get it. And so, as Whiskers lay peacefully on the couch back at home, the aliens who had come to observe her found themselves thinking about the simple joy of her existence. She had caused chaos, yes, but she had also opened their eyes to something greater. The beauty of living without rules, the freedom of being exactly who you are, and the value of enjoying life, no matter how unpredictable it might be. After the events of the previous days, the alien delegation was on their way back to the Galactic Council. Gregor and the team had spent countless hours trying to explain the odd human connection to pets, particularly cats, and their role in human society. But while the aliens were beginning to understand the general concept, there was still something they couldn't quite grasp: the total surrender of control humans had when it came to these small, furry creatures. The aliens were used to systems that ran on logic, precision, and control. There were no mysteries, no chaos. Everything had a clear purpose. But cats didn't work that way. Whiskers didn't make sense to them. Despite their confusion, the delegation was leaving with a new perspective. They had learned to see that the relationship between humans and their pets wasn't about rules or order. It was about freedom, love, and something far more abstract than they were used to. But as they departed Earth, they had no idea that their true test was just beginning. A test that would make them face a challenge they hadn't been prepared for: the true power of a cat. The return to the Galactic Council. The delegation's return to the Galactic Council was supposed to be a time for reflection and calm. They had gathered their notes, observed the humans, and seen how these small creatures called cats played such a significant role in their lives. But something was different this time. As they traveled back to their station, there was a growing sense of unease. It wasn't about the cats. They had begun to accept that strange bond. No, it was something more fundamental. The aliens had been used to control. They had systems in place to ensure everything was running efficiently. They never left things to chance. Every action, every decision was planned. Everything in their society followed the principle of logic. Yet the more they thought about the chaos caused by Whiskers, the more they realized that they had left a significant piece of the puzzle unsolved. The chaos, the unpredictability of the cat's actions, was unsettling. It reminded them of something they hadn't considered, that perhaps their societies were too structured. The question now was not only about cats, but about the unpredictability of life itself. They were afraid of chaos, afraid of the idea that the universe couldn't be controlled, predicted, or organized. That's what the visit had made them realize, whether they liked it or not. The unpredictable challenge. Jake pulled back on the controls, aiming the ship toward the asteroid field that loomed in the distance. The large rocks, floating aimlessly in space, created a dangerous maze, but it was their only hope. The ships behind them were closing in fast. Jake's heart raced as he maneuvered the Iron Wolf into the asteroid field. The ship jerked and twisted as he dodged huge chunks of rock, narrowly avoiding collisions. Lissa's breath came in short, terrified bursts as she watched the asteroids fly past them at terrifying speeds. For a few moments, it seemed like they might have lost their pursuers. The asteroid field was dense, and the ships following them had to slow down to avoid crashing. But Jake knew better than to relax. Then came the worst sound he could have imagined: blaster fire. A loud bang echoed through the ship as one of the pursuing ships fired a laser blast. The blast missed, but it was close. Too close. "We need to get out of here," Jake shouted, throwing the ship into another roll to avoid another shot. He gritted his teeth, focusing on getting through the asteroid field and finding a way out. Lissa's voice shook. "What if we don't make it?" Jake didn't answer. He couldn't afford to think like that. He needed to keep them moving, stay one step ahead. The chase was on, and it wasn't going to stop until either they made it to Perkanis Station or Derek caught up with them. Jake was starting to feel the weight of their situation. The chase had been relentless, and as they neared Draconis Station, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The pursuit had been close, too close for comfort. The asteroid field had bought them some time, but they couldn't afford to stop now. Their plan was simple: get to the station, lay low, and try to lose Derek Velos once and for all. But there was something else that weighed on Jake's mind: the marriage. As strange as it was, he had agreed to marry Lissa, and it wasn't just some simple formality. They needed it to be real, something that would hold up against the laws of her people. That meant they had to make it official. The more Jake thought about it, the more complicated it seemed. They weren't just running from Derek. They were about to take part in an alien custom that neither of them truly understood. Lissa had been quiet for most of the journey, her eyes constantly scanning the stars outside the window, her thoughts clearly far away. She wasn't the confident woman who had bargained for his help anymore. In her place was someone more vulnerable, uncertain about what the future would hold. And in a way, Jake could relate. He wasn't sure what was coming either. Perkanis Station finally came into view, a massive station surrounded by floating debris, abandoned ships, and the occasional pirate vessel. It was a place for people on the run, where the laws of the galaxy didn't apply, a haven for smugglers and outcasts. Jake set the ship down in a remote docking bay, making sure the landing was as smooth as possible. Once the ship was docked, they both stepped out into the dim, sterile corridor of the station. Lissa looked around, her eyes scanning the place nervously. It was unlike anything she had seen before. This was no friendly place. It was a haven for criminals, people who lived in the shadows. "We need to find somewhere safe," Jake said, glancing around. He didn't like how quiet it was, how empty the station seemed. It was too easy to get lost in places like this. "I know a place where we can hide for a bit, but we have to move fast." Lissa nodded, still uneasy. "What about the marriage? Do we just find a priest or something?" Jake hesitated. He didn't know how this worked. What did it even mean to marry someone in her culture? He had agreed to it because it was their only chance at survival, but that didn't make it any less confusing. "We'll figure it out. We just need someone who can help us make it official." They walked quickly, weaving through the maze of corridors. They passed several shady figures, their eyes watching them suspiciously as they moved past. There were no friendly faces here. People kept their heads down and avoided eye contact. Jake felt the tension in the air. He had been in enough dangerous places to know when things didn't feel right. After a few turns, they reached a door marked with a faded sign: Bishop Arosh, efficient for all occasions. "Well, this looks promising," Jake said, giving Lissa a quick glance before pushing open the door. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with piles of paperwork stacked high and various alien artifacts scattered around the shelves. Behind a desk sat an older man with a grizzled face, his skin a pale green that seemed to glow faintly in the dark room. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly, though there was a certain warmth to it that made him seem approachable. "We need to get married," Jake said bluntly. There was no point in sugarcoating it. They had. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the request. "Married? You too? Here?" He studied them both for a moment, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. "You sure about this? You understand this isn't some simple ceremony, right?" Lissa stepped forward, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "Yes, we understand. It needs to be real. We need the legal marriage for my protection." The man nodded slowly, his face softening with understanding. "I see. Well, if it's real you want, then I can help. But it'll cost you." Jake didn't hesitate. "How much?" 1,000 credits. I'll need to prepare the papers, and you'll need to make sure it's done properly. There's no going back once it's official." Jake turned to Lissa, his mind racing. They had enough credits, barely, but this was one more thing that tied them to the station. It made them more vulnerable, more exposed. But there was no turning back now. "Do it," Jake said, turning back to the officiant. "We don't have time to waste." Bishop Arosh nodded, standing up from his desk and motioning for them to come closer. He began pulling out a series of papers from a drawer, his hands moving deftly as he prepared everything for the ceremony. It was strange, like watching a marriage unfold under the most unusual of circumstances. Jake wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but he had to trust that this was the only way to keep Lissa safe. Lissa stood next to him, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't meeting his gaze, her eyes focused on the papers Arosh was laying out in front of them. She was silent, lost in her thoughts, and Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of what they were about to do. He wasn't even sure what it meant to marry her in her culture. Was this just a legal formality, or was it something deeper, something they both had to commit to emotionally? Arosh cleared his throat, breaking Jake's thoughts. "All right. The marriage will be simple. You'll exchange vows, sign the papers, and I'll officially register it. You two will be bound by the laws of the galaxy from this point forward. No one can undo it unless you both agree." Jake glanced at Lissa, his heart racing. He wasn't sure what he was doing. But looking at her, at the fear in her eyes, he knew this was the right thing to do. This wasn't about love or romance. It was about survival. It was about giving her a chance to live without the threat of being controlled by Derek. "Are you ready?" Bishop Arosh asked. Jake nodded, his throat dry. "Let's get this over with." Lissa hesitated, but then she nodded as well. "Yes." Arosh smiled, though there was a certain sadness in his eyes. "All right, let's begin." He spoke a few words in a language Jake didn't understand, and then turned to them. "Do you, Jake of Earth, take Lissa of Zephyra to be your lawfully wedded wife, to protect her, cherish her, and honor her for as long as you both shall live?" Jake didn't have to think about it. He knew what this meant for Lissa. He wasn't marrying her for love, but he was marrying her for her safety, and that was enough. He nodded firmly. "I do." Arosh turned to Lissa. "And do you, Lissa of Zephyra, take Jake of Earth to be your lawfully wedded husband, to honor, trust, and rely on him for as long as you both shall live?" Lissa's eyes filled with emotion as she looked up at Jake. "I do," she whispered, her voice steady but soft. The officiant nodded, and with a small smile, handed them the marriage certificate. "It is done." Jake felt a strange mix of emotions. He didn't know what to say or how to feel. He had just married an alien woman he barely knew, in a strange place, under the most unusual circumstances. The weight of it didn't quite hit him at first, but as he looked at Lissa, something shifted in him. This wasn't just a contract. This was their bond, and no matter how strange it was, it meant something. Lissa looked at him, her expression softening. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice trembling. You don't know what this means to me. Jack's heart began to race. Had he said something wrong? Was it possible that his wish was too much to ask? But then, slowly, Layla's face softened, her eyes glistening with an emotion Jack couldn't quite identify. Jack, that is the most selfless wish anyone has ever made, but you must understand that it cannot be granted. Not by me. Not anymore. Jack's heart sank. But why not? If I could be free, if I could live my life without fear, why can't you have that too? Layla sighed softly, her expression filled with a kind of melancholy acceptance. The nature of my existence is tied to the curse that bound me. I cannot escape it. No one can, not without great cost. I have seen many who wished for freedom, only to lose themselves in the process. Some sacrifices are too great, Jack. He looked at her, determination filling his chest. But you deserve it. You've given so much of yourself. You should get the chance to choose for yourself, to be free. I know it's risky, but I have to try. Layla's eyes glistened, and for a moment, it seemed as if a great weight had lifted from her. You are the first to ask such a thing, she whispered. And perhaps this is my choice. You have given me the opportunity to consider what I've always longed for, the freedom to choose. Jack's eyes widened as the realization hit him. He had given Layla the power to make her own choice. For the first time, she was not bound by her curse. She was free to choose her own path, just as he had chosen his. With a small smile, Layla stepped back, the twilight sky above her glimmering with the stars. Jack, I have made my choice. You've given me the gift of freedom, and I will choose my own destiny now. Thank you.